Our next guest is editorial director and research fellow at the Heartland Institute. He's also on the front lines of the war against socialism. And I mean that. He's actually literally a contributing author to this thing right here. Arguing with Socialists by Glenn Beck, available now. Please go buy it. Because we're not socialists here, we're capitalists. Justin Haskins joins us now. Justin, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
I want to run you by my little thesis from the beginning of the show today, which is one of the reasons this COVID situation is so difficult on us as Americans, is that our instinct in these situations when things get really tough is to fight. Like, World War II, we're out there fighting. 9/11, we want to go fight. We lose a job, we want to put our nose to the grindstone and go for it. Here, it's the total opposite. They're saying, don't fight. Whatever you do, don't leave. You can't go do anything. Don't go work. You got to stay inside. It's just it's against all of our instincts, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. In a lot of ways, it's a very anti-American situation, right? America is this country where people don't just want to go fight. They want to innovate. They want to be entrepreneurs. They want to get out there and solve whatever that problem is. And as you said, no, if the government is saying, not only do we advise that you don't do this, but you actually can't do this. And and we're not even saying you can't go innovate and be entrepreneurs and figure out a way to survive. We're saying don't even go to, stores. Don't even go buy a pair of socks in some cases. Stay home at all costs. Don't go to restaurants. Don't go anywhere. And I think it is really tough for people to deal with this. We're all just sitting at home watching Netflix hours after hour after hour when really we want to get out there and solve problems to get the economy going again.
In the book, Arguing with Socialists, you talk a lot about AOC and all of you have a lot of great stuff about AOC in there. And her new kind of take on this world is, look, we're not working now. What if we just all don't go back to work after this too? Like, this is a solution that not only is obviously it's completely implausible, but also it's one that she believes Americans want. She believes that Americans are the type of people who actually, if given the choice, would not be productive at all. They'd rather just sit at home. I mean, that's not the America that I know.
No, but you're right. I think you've nailed it on the head. I mean, I think that in AOC's universe, which actually is very similar to the Karl Marx universe, if you go back to Karl Marx, he's making a lot of these same arguments back in the 1800s, essentially saying, hey, look, we have so much wealth floating around there that we don't need to work. We could just take the wealth from the people who have produced it, keep it for ourselves, and then everyone will have more than enough than what they would need. And yeah, that doesn't fit in with America at all. It has never been part of our history, but that is absolutely how AOC sees the world. And it's totally false, by the way. There isn't anywhere near enough wealth in the world to do that, but that is definitely the picture that she's painting, and a whole bunch of other people in the Democratic Party too. It's not just her.
It's an interesting, there's like a slight split between her and an Andrew Cuomo. And you could see that sort of more standard progressivism from Cuomo, where he is just berating people. You say you want to go work? Well, get an essential job, as if you can't pass the virus when you have an essential job. Or I don't even know what he's talking about. I know that if a Republican would have had that exact same response, it would be in every commercial. It would be all over the news every day. It's Andrew Cuomo, though, and he seems to get a break for everything these days.
Yeah. I mean, this is pretty standard media giving the Democrat the pass, right? Yeah. Can you imagine if you had a Republican who dared to say that some jobs were not worthy or weren't essential to our society? Oh, my God, there'd be protests in the streets. It would be madness. So, yeah, there's no question about it. He's getting a huge pass.
Let's talk about the sort of post-COVID world here for a second, because I think this is really interesting. I know when we're putting this book together, the thought is we're in the middle of an election year. Everyone's going to be talking about election. Could be Bernie Sanders as the nominee. Either way, it's going to be someone who's much further down the Marxist road than anyone I would ever vote for. And that's not really what's happened. I mean, the election is theoretically going on, but who's even thinking about it at this point? What I keep thinking about, and I was talking to Glenn about this as well, is in a way, almost inadvertently, this book is written and really important because as the COVID thing goes away, there are going to be a lot of people, and they're showing their hands already, that are going to try to grab power and make what you're warning about in this book happen a lot more quickly, because these things can usually only happen when you have a revolution. And while this isn't a revolution, it's pretty close to it. It's that much of a disturbance. So kind of talk to me a little bit about how the book itself kind of gives you the ammunition you need to fight off the brave new world we're about to face?
Yeah, I think the idea behind this was, and you understand this better than anyone, the idea behind this was to sort of look into the future as well as the past to predict what was going to happen and how we were moving in this direction. I don't think that anybody who was involved with this book anticipated that we would suddenly be 10 years into the future, 20 years into the future, dealing with things that I mean, I'm worried about happening, but I had no idea it was going to happen this quickly. The book is more important than ever, I think, because of how dire things are getting. As you pointed out, the left loves to use crises. I mean, we all know this. Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? But socialists love it even more than just your standard progressive. They thrive in chaos, and they've always thrived in chaos, because when people are at their most desperate point, that's when they're likely to throw the entire system out the window and go with something that they've never tried before. And that's why I think we're at this really dangerous moment in history. So what's great about this book is that it doesn't just deal with factual arguments about things that have happened in the past. It doesn't just talk about things that could happen in the future. It really talks about things that are happening right now, and explains why no matter how you structure a government program, no matter how you build a system, if it's socialist in it at its core, it's going to fail. It's not going to work, because fundamentally, socialism is completely at odds with human nature, and that's why it's never worked in the past, why it will never work in the future, and why you'll see throughout this book, no matter how you try to build it, it's going to fail every single time. So the ammunition that you need to win those arguments, it's throughout this book. And I think in a way, really in a spectacular way that none of us saw coming.
Yeah, and it is it's a fun book to read too. You could jump in kind of wherever you want. It's funny, it's a really entertaining read. One of the things I think is interesting, and it's an argument you don't see taken on as much as it should, is the argument about Sweden and the Nordic countries. We hear from Bernie Sanders, well, of course, I'm not talking about North Korea. I'm not talking about Cuba. I'm talking about Sweden. I'm talking about Denmark. I'm talking about Finland. And I think there was probably a mistake by conservatives over the past 10 or 15 years in which we would say, like, we don't want to be Europe. We don't want to be socialist Europe. I don't want to be Sweden. And it's really not fair to Sweden, oddly. But it also, I think, hurts our argument, because people look at Sweden and Denmark and Finland and say, like, well, maybe it's not ideal, but it's not terrible. Socialism is quite different than what Sweden actually presents.
Yeah, this is actually maybe the most important argument for people who are younger. See, if you go and you talk to younger people about socialism, the number one thing that they'll say is, well, yeah, I don't like authoritarian socialism. I like the kind of socialism they have in Sweden and Norway and Denmark. Like, that's what I want. That's socialism to me. And it's proof that it works. You see, the socialists are at a huge disadvantage because they've never had a successful society with their model ever in the history of human civilization. So this is their one chance to show people, actually, we have a successful group of countries that have tried this. And you could just look at them. Look at how happy they are. These are little utopian countries, socialist societies, right? But the thing is, the more you dig into it, the more obvious it is that these countries aren't even remotely close to what Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez want. I mean, they do have some socialized industries, but having some socialized parts of your economy does not make you a socialist. Otherwise, every country on earth would be a socialist society. Everyone has public roads. Everyone has a military. That doesn't mean that you're a socialist country. So when you actually start looking at regulations, the tax structure, when you start looking at things like occupational licensing in some cases, when you look at school choice in places like Sweden, when you look at how they're pumping natural resources out of the ground to make money in Norway, you realize this is not the platform of the Democratic Party. They have balanced budgets or near balanced budgets in a lot of these countries. I mean, that's hardly socialist, right? So these are not socialist societies, and you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, just go look at the World Economic Freedom rankings that the Cato Institute and Heritage Foundation and other big think tanks have put out, and you'll see that among 200 countries or something like that. They're ranking in the top 25 or so. Every single one of these Scandinavian countries are in the top 30 at least. And many of them historically have ranked higher than the United States in many of these ranking reports. So these are hardly socialist societies.
Yeah, and I kind of get defeatist at times, and I think, when we move left, we almost never seem to come back the other way. It really did happen in Sweden. I mean, you could have called them a socialist country, a while ago. Now it's just not fair. And Justin's right. This is a really important article, part of the book, if you happen to have kids in college or younger people who are being tempted by socialism. That is a big argument they bring up. I want to give you one more here before we leave, which is there's a chapter in the book about modern monetary theory. And it's kind of like this nerdy thing. You see it occasionally pop up on academic blogs. And I don't know, it's not a sexy topic. I think when it was being written, however, and it's basically this idea that you can just print money and you don't have to worry about that. Stop worrying about debt. It's not a real thing. You can just keep printing money for as long as you want. It kind of seems like this academic crazy thing that's coming out. It's hard to deny. I feel like at this moment, partially because we have to, because of coronavirus, partially because there's not even a party anymore that fights back against spending. We're basically just giving this thing a whirl. We're just stepping in. We're like, let's just try modern monetary theory. And let's not have a discussion about it. Let's see how it works. We're there basically at this point. Why is it the wrong idea?
Yeah, well, modern monetary theory is one of those things that when we put it in the book, I thought this was something maybe that would happen 10, 20 years into the future, not like a couple of months into the future. But absolutely, I mean, modern monetary theory is 21st century socialism. And when you start looking at the connections that people like Bernie Sanders has to the top modern monetary theorists, you'll see that why this is such an important part of their platform. The idea, as you said, is just to print as much money as you want, but it's not just print lots of money. It's print lots of money and control the economy. That's how they control inflation. They control inflation by controlling the economy. And so in order to do that quickly enough, you have to have really tight centralized control of both the banking system, but also of regulations across the entire economy. Otherwise, there's no way to make it work. So this is 21st century socialism because you don't need to actually confiscate property in order for this to work. You don't actually need to nationalize industries per se in order to make it work. All you have to do is print so much money that you control where the money goes. And if you control the money in the society, then you control the property in the society without actually having to own anything. It's actually a really genius end run around of the normal way that you have socialism. And you don't have to throw anybody in gulags to do it. You just say, well, we're going to print money and give it to these people over here and not to those people over there. Boom, you have socialism without actually having to confiscate property. So it's a really, really dangerous idea, even if it could work. And of course, it can't work. It leads to inflation and all sorts of economic distortions. And if you look at countries like Japan, which have tried something kind of like this, you'll see they've had absolutely no GDP growth in like 25 years. This is a really bad system economically. But even if it could work, it's a way to take away everybody's economic freedom in society. I mean, it is socialism. So just for that reason alone, I would say it's a totally disastrous idea. And you're right. We are living through a version of it right now. And what the left wants to do is double down on it, make it worse, and put systems in place that allow this to keep going for years and years into the future. And that's really where the danger is.
Justin Haskins, the book is, of course, Arguing with Socialists by someone you might know, Glenn Beck. He's also from the Heartland Institute, and he's a contributing author on the book as well. Justin, thanks for coming on the program.